Welcome to Grew with Portia, the podcast that uncovers the hidden treasures within grief. I'm your host, Portia the producer, and I'm inviting you to join me on a transformative journey where we will exchange laughter, of course, the best medicine of them all. Reflect on cherished memories. Remember that time that the little boy grabbed my hand instead of his mother's at the amusement park? Yikes. And of course, discover gratitude while navigating one of life's hardest challenges, loss. So get ready to grow with me, Portia the producer. Let's dive in. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Grow with Portia. I am your host, Portia Booker, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep up with all things Grow with Portia. One of the things that I often say is that we have this notion that there's certain people who are immune to having tragedies happen in their life. For example, people who are first responders, we tend to call them when we have an emergency, but they also are human and encounter things in their lives that they never asked for. So today I'm joined by an amazing friend of mine who is not only a, if you want to call it, semi-rehired paramedic, former firefighter. He is the founder of Penton Pending Consulting Services LLC. Is that the Solutions? That's right. Penton Pending Consulting Solutions LLC. He's also a podcast host and a very dear friend of mine. So welcome back to Grow with Portia, Mr. Larry Penton, also known as LP. How you doing today?
Every day I wake up on this side of the dirt, I'm destined to continue to do whatever I'm supposed to do. If I don't wake up on this side of the dirt, I'm done. I don't have any worries, any bills, none of that stuff. I am happy as a clam as long as I can continue to work on some of these issues. Even though I'm retired as a first responder, I still work in that mindset. So it's all about saving lives, and especially from a mental health perspective. And I'm a big proponent and advocate of that, especially when we're talking about grief. And I'm ready for whatever questions you have, because that's what we do.
Well, and LP, as always, you're one of my longtime friends. I'm very grateful that our paths crossed. And as I brought up in the beginning, we tend to think that first responders are superhuman, that obviously you come into our homes, you help us, whether it's through CPR, if you're a firefighter, you come in and obviously put the blaze out. But for you, LP, you recently went through the transition of your son. And before we jump into more of the conversation, LP, can you tell our audience about your son and what you want them to remember about him through the work that you're continuing to do?
Absolutely. And thanks for asking. Peace be upon the eternal soul of my oldest son, Larry Penton Jr. He was 34 years old. He would have been 35 on July 6th of this year, 2026. In March of this year, March 4th in particular, he was found dead in the streets of St. Louis. He was living homeless in a tent in downtown St. Louis, where most of the homeless population lived, and he had been on drugs for a number of years. And I knew he had been on drugs for a number of years, and I knew he had started living on the streets. And I believe the living on the streets superseded the drug use. And despite everything that he learned from me from a little type, this is my 19 years of first responder, 14 active, and last 5 retired. I taught him everything that I know from a professional point of view about drugs. His family on his dad's side has alcoholism. On his mom's side has been substance abuse in terms of like drugs. And I always told him in his siblings, because he's the oldest 6, that you all are more highly susceptible to becoming an addict because you're getting it from both sides genetically. And I didn't become a drug addict or an alcoholic, neither did his mom. And so there's a few of the generations in the family where we avoided those pitfalls. What was the tipping point for him? I have no idea. I know his grandma, which is my ex-wife's mom, died the day before that. Maybe when he found out about that, that tipped him over to him overdosing. And like I tell people, OD does not stand for over death, it stands for overdose. Some of these we can fix, some of these is too late. And when he was found, it was too late. So there was no resuscitative methods given, no Narcan given, because there's dead and there's DED. Like my instructor said, DED means definitely extremely dead. So that means that there is nothing that you can do for that person because they're beyond resuscitative measures. He was 34 and he was a bright young man. He grew up going to gifted schools because he had tested for the gifted programs. He went to college he started his third year. Well, he dropped out in his third year. But he was a very bright young man. He loved sports, specifically basketball, Cleveland, LeBron, your neck of the woods. So he was a huge LeBron fan. He thought LeBron was the GOAT instead of Jordan. That was a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
It was like, dog, dude. But again, that was his GOAT. And for me, when I heard the news, I had been waiting on the call. It wasn't a matter of if, but when and where. You've heard me talk about that when it comes to emergencies. People are hurt, injured, dying, and dead. And it's not a matter of if, but when and where an emergency is going to happen. I had been just waiting on the call. And when I got the call, I was at work. I was teaching the CPR class. My mom called me. She was all hysterical. I had two classes to teach that day, a morning class and an afternoon class. And I just did the morning class. Mrs. LP got in her car, came down to uptown Charlotte where I was teaching the class. And she was like, I'm getting you out of here. She's like, you need to call the company, tell them you're only doing this morning class. And I did. And then I left. And we went back to St. Louis for the funeral, which was, he died on the 4th. The funeral was March 27th of this year. And we drove up there. I had the mindset that I was just going to go to the funeral, bury my son, and come back home because there's been a lot of contention and estrangement with his other siblings and myself because they're on this team mom, team dad thing. And I'm like, forget all that. You need to be team you. And I think for me as a first responder, not just a dad, the grief plays into our mindset because this is personal. I used to always tell people I never had a fear. My biggest fear in EMS, because I was on EMS and then I got in the fire. My biggest fear was not running into a burning building. It was not getting T-boned in the intersection because somebody didn't want to yield to me. It was getting the EMS call, coming across that person and finding out it's somebody I know. Imagine this. I'm on duty on an ambulance. I get a call for an unresponsive person. I get out of my ambulance and I go up to that person and I turn them over or I look at them in their face and it was him. It could have easily been me if I was still in St. Louis working, it could have easily been me. And so how do you deal with those situations? How do you deal with the immediate grief and be professional at the same time? I can't tell you for certain what I would have done. I really can't. I don't know if I would have been in a fetal position. I don't know if I would have been yelling and screaming. I don't know if I would have been just in a tunnel vision mind mode. In here I'm a 9.9, but I'm like a cool as the other side of the pillow. I don't know. I literally don't know. I think I would have given it my best. That's my baby. I don't know how I was going to react. I tell you what, though, if you Google suicide rates for first responders just going back to 2020 to present, you'll be amazed at the numbers, and they ain't getting lower. And I know a number of them, especially back in my hometown. And they're getting younger. And grief is something that we talk about all the time. I'm ready for some more of these questions because I love having these conversations. I don't love why we're having a conversation, of course, because we want our loved ones to be here as long as they can be here. He was 34.
Yeah, you're LP. I appreciate you sharing not only from a first responder standpoint, but also as a father, this being your firstborn that is transitioned. And I'm not far from your firstborn's age. And when I think about LP, you brought up about first responders and the suicide rates going up. I'm curious, LP, from a standpoint of you working in the industry, and now even though you do more of the consulting side, what do you think first responders need to help them to not reach that point? Because I wonder if is there support? What do you think is really contributing to the high rates of suicide for our heroes that come to our rescue?
There's a number of things. So, one, you have to understand that mental health, I came up with this quote, and you heard me say this some years ago. Mental health crisis is the world's oldest continuous pandemic that's been around since the beginning of mankind, and it's not going anywhere. Until we deal with the stigmas, the taboos, the stereotypes associated with mental health crisis, we're going to continue to see some of these things that may come out as a breaking news story. Now, at one point, I was getting a lot of breaking news stories before they hit Fox and CNN because I still keep my security clearance because I teach at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security because I had security clearance when I was in EMS for some of the work that I was doing back then. When I think of grief, and you have it's typically it's 7 stages, but most people know it at 5. It's denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, and depression. And grief is not linear. You might go from denial to anger to bargaining to depression to acceptance. You might go from denial to anger to denial to anger to anger to anger to bargaining to denial. You don't know how you're gonna navigate that minefield of grief because it's a minefield, and you're gonna be injured even if you don't get blown to smithereens because that person or those individuals are no longer there. For me, as a first responder, what I say to other first responders is first and foremost, your certifications, your licenses, your degree, if you have one as a first responder in that particular field, does not keep you from having a human emotion. It is just a piece of paper from an organizing body. It does not make you bulletproof. It does not mandate you by law in certain situations to render aid. And it has nothing to do with the fact that your humanity is always on, or it should be. So for me, if I get a call for someone who's hurt, injured, dying, and dead, I have the mindset of knowing that this may be something that's all bad. We prepare for the worst and hope for the best on every single call. You learn that in the early stages of your EMS training. For us to approach these bad calls, you got to walk away the same way you came into that call, hopefully. Healthy, happy, and whole. I call it the 3 H's. Now, I know whole doesn't start with H, but R doesn't start with arithmetic. People still use it. So just love them. When I would leave for my fire shift, my 48-hour fire shift, 2 days on, 4 days off, I would tell Mrs. LP, hey, I got my go bag. I don't know what I'm going to see in this next 2 days. I want to see good, bad, and hopefully no ugly, but I don't know what I'm going to experience. I hope to come back the same way mentally as I did leaving here. Kiss, kiss, goodbye. We're talking while I'm gone and all this stuff, communicate. When I get back home, I'm asking her, hey, how was your day? How was your last 2 days? Oh, she's a project manager. Oh, people weren't meeting the deadlines. I had to do all this and paperwork and blah, 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 blah. And she asked me, well, how was your 2 days? Okay. Well, I had a newborn set of twins that we had to work on one of them for an hour doing CPR because they were born stillborn, and that one didn't make it. Oh, I had another kid who was cutting grass to make some money in the summertime, young teenager, cut off first his big toe and his second toe and his third toe because he was wearing some flip-flops and ran over his feet with the lawnmower. All kind of stuff. I don't know what I'm gonna see. Some of the people were dead. Some of the people were dying. And I never did anything like that to those people, but I'm coming across it all the time. That's part of the job. Where we go wrong as first responders is looking at it and saying, oh, well, that's part of the job. You know, going in that you're going to see traumas. You know, going in that you're going to see horrible stuff. You know, going in that it may affect you. How do you deal with that? Because in 10 calls, let's say in St. Louis, it's known as, if not the murder capital of the US, is in the top three. So out of 10 calls, three of them might be traumas of all ages, newborns, infants, children, and adults. You don't know what you're going to see. And I'm talking about back to back, and you got 20 minutes between each call to get your ambulance clean and back for the next call. Oh, it's got all this blood and all this crap around because we done took everything out of the shelves to resuscitate this person. It looks like a mess in the back of the ambulance. We literally got to get a water hose and spray the whole back of the ambulance because it's blood and all kind of stuff all over the place. That's one call. You got 20 minutes to get your ambulance clean and write your report and go back into service for the next call. Every single call, every single shift, every single day. How do you deal with that death and dying? Well, there's two things that we have at our disposal to help us with that. It's called critical incident stress debriefing, and then you have critical incident stress management. Let's start with the one that's right there that you're going to deal with, the critical incident stress debriefing. If we go to a call and it's bad, whether somebody died or was dying, and it affects us, me or my partner or whoever the first responders were, you can get help right then and there, whether it's your supervisor, your commanding officer, whoever it is. That person should say, hey, are you okay? You okay? You okay? And if you ain't okay, what do you need? Do you need a minute? Do you need a couple of minutes? Do you need to sit down for this next call, or do you need to go home? Now, most of us are not going to do that because, again, that's part of the job. However, that does not keep you from not being pulled off that call or the next call if it's really that bad for you and you really can't focus, because it ain't no point of you going on the next call and you're still in the moment and you're still there and somebody else is taking care of that situation. That's critical incident stress debriefing, where we'll all get together, everybody that was on that call, either right then or within 24 hours, and just have a conversation about it. Kind of like, hey, just kind of reflection. How did they work for you? Whatever, good, bad, or ugly. The critical incident stress management is you going to therapy. It could be virtual, it could be in person. It ain't got to involve medicine, but medicine has its place. You don't have to sit on somebody's couch for 45 minutes doing the Q&A, because that does not help a lot of people. And we know that there's multiple forms of therapy. There's metaphysical forms. You have Reiki. You have hypnotherapy. Some people I've interviewed on our podcast where they help people with mental health crisis using, they call it shadow work, using tarot
Yeah.
cards and crystals and stuff. There's all kind of therapy, the EFT, the tapping, all kind of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different forms of metaphysical therapy that you have to be open to that. And so for first responders, I got a partner, old partner of mine. She wrote a book and a journal. She's a former EMT. Her name is Gina Sokolich. And she wrote these two books. One is Stepping Through Grief, and the other one is the journal to that. And she became a licensed professional counselor and a therapist. She's a certified trauma professional. And I remember when the reason she wrote this book is because her long-term guy, who was a paramedic, not a paramedic, he was an EMT and a firefighter, he died of cancer.
Mm.
Wasn't even 50. Okay. And he was a very healthy guy. He was just a phenomenal man. His name is Frank. And Frank was my buddy. And I'm telling you, it still breaks my heart when I think about him. And right behind my head on this corkboard, there's a tribute sticker to him with his basic EMT number on it. And Frank Seifert was just a great human being overall. Cared about patients, cared about people, was funny, was very fit, was very dedicated to family. And I'm telling you, seeing him decline, seeing that cancer break him down, seeing how Gina had to become literally his nurse, his home health aide, all of that stuff, it was hard. And I know that whether it's somebody that you know or it could be a patient, when we talk about grief, you got to understand how grief works, and you got to be willing to say these two words: seek help. If you don't seek help, there's no stigma, taboo, or stereotype worth you imploding and starting to use drugs or alcohol or exploding and going out doing something postal where I'm going to get that story before it hits Fox and CNN. I don't want to see that. I don't want to hear another story about that. But we're going to keep doing that, keep hearing these stories because people are refusing to seek the help properly because of these stigmas and stereotypes. And the grief ain't going nowhere. Not
LP, I
until
want
you
to touch
deal
on
with it
that.
properly.
I want to touch on that really quick because you brought up, we both know that there's a stigma attached to mental health, there's a stigma attached to addiction, there's a stigma attached to how grief is supposed to look, especially for communities of color. And as you mentioned, there's options out there for people to get the help they need. It may not always be through talk therapy because sometimes you're so blocked up from all the trauma, all the things you've seen that the words won't come out. Right. Then you have obviously EFT, you've got tapping, you've got yoga. I know there's like trauma for yoga. I'm wondering, LP, what do you think continues to fuel that stigma? What do you think is the reason so many people are afraid to say I need help when they're really struggling and they're continuing to go towards whether it's addiction or isolating and obviously the suicide rates that continue to run up? What do you think can help people to feel safe, to feel as though someone hears them? And even maybe just to throw this in the ring, maybe being in the environment of trying to save the world in that capacity may not be the career for them because that takes a lot of courage. It wears on your heart because you're seeing tragedies happen to different people and you're the first person that maybe their loved ones saw before they took their last breath.
For me, I would say one of the big things that keeps first responders from making that call is, again, not only the nature of the job, the potential loss of that income.
Mm,
If Because I've heard some supervisors say to some people that were experiencing a mental health issue after a bad call, you know, if you can't handle this, maybe this is not the career for you. That's a valid statement and a valid
yeah,
point. Maybe not right then in that moment, but at some point that conversation that subject needs to be broached. The nature of the job, especially, the average turnover rate for an EMS worker in the city of St. Louis that works for a city EMS in particular, 2 years. The burnout rate,
mm,
2 years. They got 13 ambulances, if 13 of them are in service, because most times it's 10 out of the 13, because they're getting old and need repair and all this stuff. They got 13 ambulances and they run over 90,000 calls a year. Think of that. And let's say they're doing 12-hour shifts. And we're talking about one of the top three, if not the number one murder capital in the US. So most of those calls are traumatic calls. And if you're seeing this stuff every day, every day, every day, newborns to somebody in triple digits, that's going to have an effect on you.
right.
How do you deal with that? Well, what's the quick way to deal with it? Oh, I'm going to take a drink. Oh, I'm going to get high. Oh, I might take it out on my loved one to go upside their head, even though they didn't do it, because I'm mad, I'm
Right.
pissed off, or whatever. And they're asking me, and I'm like, oh, quit asking me all this stuff. Or somebody told me I had to go to therapy. So now you see this in all kind of TV shows. Every time you see some first responder, whether it's fire, EMS, or police, they got to go to therapy, and they're sitting there with a whole damn tube, and they don't want to answer the questions, and they're like calling the professional a shrink and all this stuff. It's like,
Right.
first of all, you came here. I didn't come to you. I'm here to help you help yourself deal with the situation. If you want to walk, by all means walk. I'm just going to report to whoever I have to report to what happens. And you got to deal with the fallout of that. If that means you get suspended or fired or whatever because you're not following the company's protocols when it comes to that stuff, then you have every right to do it however you want to do it. Now, when we're talking about dealing with certain situations, especially from the mental health perspective, I say that if it's me and I'm in that situation, I'm not going to shy away from the help because I'm not a Superman or a Superwoman. I'm not a superhero because to me, Mrs. LP got me this plaque and I got it on my wall. She gave it to me some years ago. It says, not all superheroes wear capes, and it has the
Yeah.
EMS Star of Life on it. You know what that means to me? That means that a superhero is an ordinary person that does some extraordinary things in some extraordinary circumstances, knowing that, you know what, they may be affected by those circumstances that they have to interact in because you have a duty to act. It ain't like a
Yeah.
situation where if you walked into CVS and you saw somebody laying out in aisle 9, you don't have a duty to act. Morally speaking, at minimum, you should just call 911 because all help, as I tell my students in my CPR class, I'll say, hold up your phone and remember these 6 words. All help does not mean hands on. That does not mean that you have to put hands on. If you have a duty to act like a first responder, now when I'm off duty, I'm off duty. I don't have a duty to act, but I still probably will intervene in that emergency. Now, how's that going to affect me? I don't know. I've had situations where I thought I was cool as a cucumber, and 4 days later, 5 days later, I'm just sitting there watching the game or working or I'm reading or something like that, and I have a moment and that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't expect at all. And I'm telling you, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, OMG, I need to make an appointment with my therapist because I still see a therapist. Not all the time, just when I need. And it's all virtual. And I'm telling you, if more first responders would do that, just that, again, you don't have to lay on somebody's couch for 45 minutes. I've never had to take medication. And I've had therapy over the years, even through my first marriage that
Mm-hmm.
and I married the same person, the mother of my kids, we got married twice. We did all kind of therapy then. I never had to be on no pills or none of that stuff. Again, medicine has its place. My point is to people when it comes to grief, it, the help that you have available is really endless.
Yeah.
You can't be therapy wise either. What that means is you go into it just knowing what to say and how to act so they can say, okay, they're good. They don't need any help anymore. But you really ain't healed or you're not healing. You're just saying the right things so you can get out of it because you may have
Right.
5 sessions to do mandated by the company or whatever. There's a lot of people that are therapy wise. And in a sense, or they're therapists, they'll, you might go try to find a therapist that's going to kind of feature or
Mm-hmm.
meet your needs. But that is not, well, I'm just going to keep finding another therapist until they say what I want them to say. That's not how it's supposed to work. But I see people doing that all the time. And it's like, you're not going to get help at all. You're just in front of somebody. And so that's fake and it's phony. And it's not going to get you to go to the next phase of that grief, which is acceptance. It's just like the serenity prayer. There's some things that you can't do anything about. Good, bad, and ugly. I have I have a philosophy that I say, and you've probably heard this, everything happens for a reason, good, bad, and
Yeah.
ugly. There's
Yeah.
some people that are hard, like, or dead set against that. They do not believe in that. It's an offensive to them when they hear it. And here's what I say. I was married twice to the same person, which is the mother of my children. It didn't work out the first time. It didn't work out the second time. And I could have stayed in that marriage. We could have never got divorced. What type of life would I have? What type of mental, how would I be right now? You see how this gray hair? Okay, I think I would either be dead or have stroked out if I would have stayed married to my first wife, or maybe an act of violence would have happened. I'm not a woman beater. I'm just telling you, you don't know how stuff can turn out when it's bad in a relationship, because domestic violence is not something that's always physical. Most of
Right.
the time, it ain't
Yeah.
physical. So when we're talking about grief, it don't even have to be in death or a physical death. The death of a marriage is just as worse as somebody losing their life in a lot of ways. I would not have been able to be in this relationship with Mrs. LP if I was still in that relationship, because it was not going anywhere. And even to today, we don't talk at all. Not even when we were at the funeral. I could not tell you what she had on at the funeral.
Yeah. And I think too, to your point, LP, because you were aware enough to recognize I need help, especially as a man. And I think there's a lot of stigma because you're a man asking for help as
Yeah,
well. And LP,
absolutely.
before we continue the conversation, for our audience who's tuning in, if they want to obviously connect with you, do one of your trainings, because I know you do Stop the Bleed training still. And so if our audience wants to connect with you, how can they do that?
Two ways. Of course, you're going to have links in your show notes as a producer. Okay. So our website is pentonpending.com, pentonpending.com. I also have a digital business card that I'm going to show you on the screen, and I'll send you the links for that also, where you can reach out to me. And I do Stop the Bleed. I do CPR, BLS. I travel all across the country teaching these classes from the Carolinas to California. That's my digital business card right there. This app called POPL. So we travel all over doing these things, teaching tactical medicine, and a big proponent, as I am, of mental health. I refer people to other mental health professionals that I know of, like my friend Gina, who wrote this book in this journal. I have another friend of mine, Dr. Tori Williams, who is a nationally recognized ACEs expert. This Black woman has a doctorate in education. She's from my home state of Missouri. Go Chiefs, as you see in the back, but she's from KC. I'm from St. Louis. So, it's all about the show me state. And she talks about, and I'm an ACEs ambassador. And one of the things that we talk about when it comes to grief is the ACEs pyramid. So this is the ACEs pyramid. You can download this off of the cdc.gov's website. And it's a pyramid. It has an arrow from conception to death, and it has all these rungs, these levels of this pyramid, starting at the bottom. You have generational embodiment and historical trauma, social conditions and local context, adverse childhood experiences, disrupted neurodevelopment, social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, uh, adoption of health risk behaviors, disease or dis-ease, disability, and social problems, all the way up to the top to early death. If you don't know what your ACEs are, and there's a quiz you can take it from that cdc.gov site. Uh, it does not mean that you're horrible if you have a high score, because it's from 0 to 10. My score, and I did it twice. I did it 1 year, and then I did it about a year and a half later. My score initially was a 4. When I took it again recently, it was a 5. All that means is it lets you know what that number is, and they'll break down what each number is to let you know what you need to focus on when you go to seek help. Does not mean that you're the worst person in the world. Don't mean that you need to be hospitalized. Don't mean that you need to be medicated. Don't mean that somebody should call you crazy, insane, or a lunatic. It just means that, like it says, the mechanism by which adverse childhood experiences influence health and well-being throughout the lifespan. You don't have to still be a child to have residual effects of adverse childhood experiences.
Right.
So specifically for men, because men, we're like healthcare workers. We make the worst patients in the world. Okay. And a man could be standing there, like y'all, women, y'all go to the doctor for all kind of stuff, good, bad, and ugly. A guy, we could literally be standing there, blood shooting out, our arm hanging by one skin cell. We'd be like, hey, bro, give me a band-aid. We'll be all right. And y'all sitting there like, you about to die. Really? And we're like, yeah, we right. It's just a little scratch. I ain't got time to bleed.
Right.
Right?
Right. And to your point about that, LP, I think the narratives are starting to change. You're seeing more and more men become vulnerable about what hurts. And there was an episode that I did around ACEs, and we may have to do a part two because I don't think people realize the impact that ACEs have on them. And I mean, it could potentially be why so many people have transitioned early as a result of those unresolved things. Well, everybody.
You really need to interview Dr. Tour.
Well,
That's
please do an introduction. I'll definitely have Dr.
absolute.
Tori on the show. Well, everybody, that was my dear friend, Mr. Larry LP, on our show today. And that concludes this episode of Grew with Portia. And until next time, everybody, peace and hair grease, everyone.